Hi everyone. I guess I'm very late to the party. I'm very late to the party, and I've never done this before. But yeah, it's always a first time. Basically, my name is Akin, and I've always been wondering, like, what exactly does it mean? What exactly does it mean to be African? What does it mean? It's so very vexing discussion because when you look at it, do we um, define an African by the color of their skin, or do we define an African by the leaf, or do we define an African by basically the people who live essentially on the African continent? Because now, if we want to define people who are African by the color of the skin, it's really a very vexing issue because the African continent is probably one of the most diverse continents in the world. Take for instance, when you look at the Khoisan people of South Africa, Namibia, and Botswana, they look really very very different from me. I'm what is referred to an African continent as a Bantu because I'm from Nigeria. I'm from West Africa, so I look really radically different to those people. The Khoisan people uh, are Caucasoid in look. No, I mean they're Mongoloid in look. Like when you look at them and then you compare with somebody from China, say someone from Mongolia, and of course from the Far East, they look really close, to those people in the tone of the skin and of course in their physiological features. And of course, then you have to consider people who are from the Horn of Africa, who are basically like a cross between, black people, like black people, and people from the Middle East. And that's why the Somalis, the Ethiopians, like when you talk about the Oromo, the Gurage, the Afars, the Tingrian, and the rest of them, they tend to have, you know, very Caucasian features, but with very brown skin. And then, of course, when you talk about the Berber, the Berber in Algeria, the Berber in Morocco, and of course, in parts of Tunisia, and then they don't look exactly like me. Then when you talk about the people from Egypt, the people of Egypt look also really very different. So basically, it's kind of like it's really hard to define who really is African. Is what does it mean to be African? You know, if you want to say you're African, does it mean that you live African continent? In that case, what do we say about people who are black who live in the United States of America? Well, black itself is a social construct because in actual fact, nobody is actually black in the real sense of it. I mean, and by that I mean this. I mean, like when you look at this phone, this is really black, and then when you compare this with my skin, there's a radical, a very radical difference. So it's really very hard to categorize people by their skin tone, and essentially that's why people say the idea of color itself is a social construct, which doesn't, in reality, in actuality, doesn't really make sense because there's really no white or no black. So what makes an African? In my opinion, I think what makes an African is the love for the continent. You don't have to be black. Essentially, you don't have to be Arab, or you don't have to be a Berber, you don't have to be a Somali or a Gurage or an Oromo or an Afar for that matter. You don't have to be a Zulu or a Osa or a Yoruba for you to be an African. What makes you an African is your love and your dedication to the African continent and to the development of the people of the continent. Because there are people who do look like me, but on no account are they African, not in their thinking, not in their orientation, and not in their loyalty. So these are the issues that one needs to examine when we talk about what it means to be African. So it's really a vexing issue. So, and it's definitely really very hard. Yeah, by the way, my name is Akin, and I'm actually doing this for the very first time. The thing is, I've always been very active behind the scene because I'm a writer, a film and television producer. And so basically, I have been active behind the scene, but this is the first time I'm actually standing in front of the camera and doing this. I guess I'll try and keep doing this from time to time and see what it's like. Let's end this stream now. Talk to you tomorrow.